Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to attend the inaugural conference of the 7th edition of the International Organ Congress, placed under the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, as announced by Minister Sadiqi. The topic is the impact of climate change on the organ tree and the organ ecosystem, scientific evidence and strategic implications. We are honored to welcome Dr. Bkawi Fawzi, Director of the National Institute of Agricultural Research in Morocco, who will be delivering this presentation. Please join me in giving him a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Excellencies, honorable participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, assalamu alaikum, bonjour. It is my pleasure to share with you this presentation entitled The Impact of Climate Change on the Organ Tree and the Organ Ecosystem, Scientific Evidence and Strategic Implication. Okay, so this is the outline of my talk. I would be sharing with you several aspects. I'll start by talking about the organ tree, its socioeconomic importance, biology and ecology. The climate change in Morocco, what are the signs of climate change? How do we see that? And then the impact of climate change on the organ, agro-silvo-pastoral system and socioeconomic implication. Then talk about some of the adaptation strategy to climate change, and then the contribution of the organery to carbon sequestration, and finish with some key messages and perspective. First of all, the organ in Morocco. So through the introductions we've seen, a lot of it has been already said, but it's okay to remind that it's an endemic species to Morocco. It's vital for the local ecosystem. The organ tree plays an ecological and economic role in semi-arid areas, has diverse implications for human and food, cosmetics, energy production, and its economic impact is important. The industry sustained vast network of livelihood with over 150,000 households directly involved, supported by 850 cooperatives and more than 500 private companies. Land utilizations is quite significant, 9% of the national agricultural land. Economic value of 4,000 to 5,000 tons of organ gold is produced, of which 660 is exported. In 1998, as it was already mentioned, the organ was declared a biosphere reserve, and it's approximately 830,000 hectares involving 3 million inhabitants. It has been also mentioned by the DG of FAO that has been declared the globally important agricultural heritage system in 2018 and constituted of 11 ecosystems with a rich biodiversity with high endemism, 1,240 species and 660 animal species. We're going to show some of these examples. And also its high agricultural farming system diversity, agro-silvopastoral mainly on terraces, and it is an important corridor against desertification. So the biology of organ, it's Organia spinosa belonging to the Sapotaceae family. And I question, is it one species? We'll see some data later on, but up to now it has been considered as one species. It has a lifespan of 200 years, showcasing its longevity and resilience. Its physiology is quite unique. It's tolerant to drought, 100 millimeters of rainfall, and survive temperature up to 50 degrees. It's multiplied by seed, which is in little bit relative recalcitrance to vegetative multiplication. Now, organ doesn't exist by itself. It's within an ecosystem that involves other plants and other animals such as goat, insect, pollinators, lichens, and microorganisms. Just for instance, mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza are an important fungus that helps in providing the phosphorus to the organ and also improving its water use efficiency. Now here we look at the diversity of the organ tree. There's different shapes. We see some trees have spines, others don't. The leaf shape as shown in the picture is quite diverse. Some different forms, and also when it comes to the fruit, the seeds and the nuts, they come in all shapes, and also the number of nuts per fruit or per seed can be diverse, 2 or 3. These observations raise the question, is this a unique species? Well, a colleague at INRA, in collaboration with the University of Ibn Zohar in Agadir, have been looking at diverse genotypes, whether in our collections, in INRA, or in the wild, and they have identified, in fact, what's likely to be 3 species. And this is based on 3 evidence. The first one is chromosome numbers. The second is flower cytometry and cross-pollination status. What differentiates a species from another? A species cannot cross if it cannot cross with another species, basically. So what we're seeing is that in the organic ecosystem, there are more than 1 species, and this has a very important potential impact. I can mention at least 2 or 3. The first one, it means that if it's diverse, if it's more than 1 species, it's probably going to be more adaptable to some of the climate change. It has more chance of being adaptable than if it was a unique, more uniform species. The second one, from an applied point of view, which species should we multiply? Which one should be going to the organary? So that means we need to do more work to understand more these different species. There could be more, we don't know. Another one is we should not talk about the organ species, we should talk about the multiple organ species. Genomics will help us understand this. First of all, we already did some studies at INRA by identifying the approximate size of the genome, which approximately 800 million bases. We were able to sequence and assemble approximately 670. What does it mean? That means we know most of the bases and the genes that control all of the characteristics of organ. We know the sequence. We don't know which one does what. So we need to do more work to do that. We identify markers, more than 200,000 markers. We identify also the sequence of the chloroplast. Chloroplast is present in the cytoplasm and play a role in photosynthesis. There are approximately 122 genes in that. Why genomics is important? It has an effective assessment. It allows us effective assessment of the diversity. It will strengthen the conservation of genetic resources, and we can use the genetics or the sequence to do molecular marker assisted and identify and breed better trees. Now, within the organ biosystem, there are a lot of other species. We cannot talk only about the trees. My colleague at INRA Agadir have identified 11 species of lichens that are shown on the right. We don't know whether they have a positive or negative role, but they are associated with organ. We look at several insects. Of the ones that we were able to identify, 54% are ants and 10% are coleopters. One of the interesting findings is a new insect called Thermothorax tamariensis. It has been found in the city close to Essaouira, not far from here, Tamari, and this is only found with organ in Morocco. So what it means is there are species that has evolved and adapted to organ that don't exist elsewhere. And it's a bioindicator of the organary and represents a new example of the importance of Morocco as a center of evolution of North African mycofauna. Now we talk about climate change. How do we look at climate change? The first thing, One of my colleagues has been looking at the frequency of droughts since 1905. I mean, it's not difficult to see that the number of blow dots are more frequent on the right side than the left side. If we look at the distribution of the drought years, more frequent since 1975. Less rain. We consider a drought year when there is 250 millimeters of rain or less. Another thing with climate change, it's not only rainfall, it's temperature. Measuring temperature since 1982 show that there is an increase of 0.04 degrees per year, very consistent. And more important is the increase compared to the average temperature. If we look at the last 20 years, only 3 years where the temperature was below average. 17 years were above average, including last year we observed an average temperature of 1.5 degrees above average, a significant increase. Now, what is the impact of this climate change, in particular on Argan? Well, on the environment level, we could see that it will affect soil loss, the terraces abandonment, erosions, biodiversity loss, farming system mutation. I should say, we don't have a clear evidence of biodiversity loss by species because we don't know all the species. We couldn't measure them. However, as we will see later, if there is a decrease in the area of Argan, it's probably going to affect the loss of biodiversity. But these effects on the environment have a direct effect on the socio-economic impact. Low Argan fruit productions, increase in oil prices, revenue of small farmer and cooperative will decrease, reduction of export and fluctuation of Argan product, and finally migration to cities, which is shown in this next slide. Here we look at the populations of communities of Eight Baha and in the Anti-Atlas Mountains. In all cases of the towns that we look at, there is a decrease of the populations between 1994 and 2014, a decrease between 10 to 50%, which is significant. Now, they moved towards the cities, obviously, which will have an impact on the populations. Another important observations, and I will cite several references here that have been done to look at the impact of climate change. On the left is basically what has been observed. For example, 44% reduction in the density between 1970 and 2007. That's in the province of Taroudannt. In the province of Haha, there is a decrease in the density of 2% in 22 years and surface loss of about 0.2% in 13 years. In the mountain areas of Eight Baha, an estimated 2 to 30% of tree present in 2003 disappeared in 2011. On the right is a projection in the future. Here we're looking at modeling. So this is based on simulations. And we're looking at two aspects, 2050 and 2070, but both shows two important factors. The first one is that there will be a retraction of the area of Argan growth. And the second one is a move towards the north of the area where Argan is going to grow, and that's what's shown in green. Now, are there things we can do? Obviously, these are the adaptation strategy that I'm going to share with you in the next slide. There are already actions that are being undertaken. Natural forest restoration and improved management practices. His Excellency, the Minister, mentioned this program, Strategy Forest of Morocco. I'll say a few words about it. The terraced agroforestry system, which is an ancient farming practice combining seasonal crops such as cereals and legumes and perennial ones, including almonds, such as Prunus dulcis, prickly pear, figs, Argan. All of these can help in maintaining the ecosystem of Argan in this terraced agroforestry system. There obviously we can use optimized growing conditions that I will describe and selections of genotype with better tolerance to drought and heat and vegetative multiplication. Within the natural forest, there's the program to restore by 2030 400,000 hectares Approximately 209,000 hectares have been restored by 2020. Within organic culture, the agroforestry system, to alleviate pressure on the natural forest, there's an objective 2030 to plant 50,000 hectares as part of Génération Green strategy. There's been an accomplishment of approximately 10,000 hectares as part of Morocco Green Plan. Establishing argan orchard in degraded environment is another way of adaptation, and here we combine restoration and rehabilitation by planting argan orchard on private land, practicing adapted farming system with alley-cropping by including other plants, aromatic and medicinal plants, refarming abundant agricultural land and terraces, alleviate also anthropic pressure on natural forests and improving carbon sequestration. I will talk a little bit about that later. All of these improve resilience. There's a lot of work going on within a project, Green Climate Fund. It's called a DARE project, a $50 million investment with 20% co-funding from our government. Organic culture is a participatory approach. There's an agreement with more than 50 NGOs for planting 10,000 hectares, with 2,000 as alley cropping, so combining aromatic medicine plant. And this is done in 8 provinces. The potential impact from a revenue for the small farmer is significant. If the farmer is growing only barley, it will have 150 US revenue. It can go to 400 with argan. If we add to it capers, the revenue can increase to 500 US. And obviously, within the same project, there's a team looking at how we can improve the culture and the growing conditions. So we need to prepare the soil, better prepare the soil. We need to do what's called boil and impluvium depending on the topography of the land. That will preserve water. We need to use mulching. We need to use also compost, intensive management irrigation. Even though there is not a lot of water in some regions, by providing a minimum amount of water, 1,800 to 3,200 meter cubics per hectare can help, and also pruning young plant. All these practices will help the growth of argan and has a better establishment of the plantations. Another objective is mass production of registered variety by grafting and cutting. INRA has registered so far 13 varieties that have shown higher productivities, and these are in the process of being multiplied by nurseries for mass propagations through grafting and cutting. I said earlier that argan is relatively recalcitrant to multiplication. If we compare it to date palm or cactus or even olive, it's more difficult to make a cutting of argan. We can do it. We are doing it, but it's slow. There is a technology called somatic embryogenesis that could alleviate this recalcitrance of multiplication of argan. This technique has been applied in other trees. It's not unique. It has been applied in oil palm. It has been applied in forestry trees in Canada. It's a true to type, so it means it will keep the same genotype. It's a complete rejuvenation process. That means we start with an old tree and we make a seed that has a bud and a root, and it will grow like a young seed. And it's high throughput multiplication. This picture shows the different step, and we are observing some encouraging results in INRA. The pictures on the left shows the green. The pictures on the left shows the green leaf. So we start with an old aged leaf. We induce callus, which shown in white. The next picture is a suspension cell. So we grow the cells in a flask, which is shown in the bottom part to the left, and then we go in such a fermenter. If this technique is successful, and I believe it will be, it will help in the multiplication, high throughput multiplication of argan tree, specifically for organic culture. I believe that for the reforestation, for the natural forest, we should keep using seeds. But for organic culture, this method could be a method of choice in the future. I will end my presentation with the last topic, which is carbon sequestration. So my colleagues, in collaborations with other universities, under the DARIT project have been looking at carbon sequestration. I'll share with you some of the results. The first thing, which is obvious, the older the tree, the more carbon sequestered. And some of the numbers are shown there. What is interesting is that the soil can sequester a lot more carbon than we thought, and the amount sequestered by the root is much higher than the one sequestered by the upper plant. Now, they did some calculations, and we estimated within the program, the 50,000 hectare program that we are ongoing, by 2030, we plant the 50,000 hectare. And we look at when the plants will become 14 years old. The sequestration of these plants will be, on average, it will correspond to sequestration that's equivalent to 1,200,000 cars. For your information, the whole number of cars in Morocco is about 4.5 million. What this means is the argan and its plantation, if successful and maintained to 2030, can help very much in carbon sequestration. Our colleagues have looked at also the forest as it exists and measured the amount of carbon that's sequestered. Now, it's not per year, it's the total. They look at the soil, etc. What is interested here is to compare with other forests. And in fact, we find that the argan forest will sequester less than other forests because the density is lower. But these studies will be continued and needs to be further gained because it has an impact. And the impact is on the carbon footprint, obviously. And this will be one of my last slides. The carbon footprint associated with argan oil production remain modest compared to other sectors, such as olive growing. So the main emission comes from electricity consumption by cooperatives and transport linked to export by companies. Although the assessment reveals a net positive contribution of the argan sector to the greenhouse gas emission reduction, it remains possible to implement measures to further improve this record. To optimize the carbon footprint, it would be wise for cooperatives and companies to transition to solar energy usage, capitalize on the byproduct of argan tree through pyrolysis, and encourage argan farming as well as good orchard management practices. Finally, I will finish with summarizing some of the key messages. The challenges are real. We've seen that there is a reduction in the growing area, that there is impacting humans on the migration of populations, but there are opportunities. There are opportunities of programs that exist. We know more about the biology. We need to conserve some of the species if we want to keep the argan ecosystem intact. The reforestation and generation under the Generation Green strategy is a very important program. The organic culture will provide even means of improving productivity and helping the small farmers. We've seen that there is opportunity for carbon sequestration. The argan tree and forest can contribute to the overall carbon footprint, reducing the carbon footprint in Morocco. Research, development, and innovations are very important. We need to continue our understanding of the ecosystem. We need to look at new methods, genomics, somatic embryogenesis, artificial intelligence, and precision agriculture are all methods that could help us manage and improve the argan. Obviously, collaboration is key. A single institution, research institution, can't do that. Several of our projects are with ENZOA. We work also with universities such as Ibn Zohar University. We need to continue these collaborations in order to understand better the ecosystem and improve the arganery. Capacity development, forming PhD students is key, and also involving the professional organization because they play a key role here. Thank you for your attention. I would like to thank several of my colleagues who contributed to helping me with this presentation and are shown in the slide.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bakawi, for bringing us your scientific perspective. Thank you for highlighting the challenges, highlighting the opportunities, and also sharing with us the perspectives and strategies for mitigating climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, as we bring this commemoration to a close, let us carry with us the values of resilience, sustainability, and cultural heritage, which the argan tree symbolizes perfectly. Happy International Day of Argania. Thank you for your attendance, for you all online, and this concludes our broadcast. Thank you. Mesdames et messieurs, nous étions donc en live sur la Web TV des Nations Unies. Nous vous invitons à rester avec nous quelques instants le temps de la signature d'un accord, pendant que les collègues procèdent à mettre en place la table qui va servir à accueillir cette signature. Je vais me permettre de vous parler un petit peu de cet accord qui sera signé dans quelques instants, juste le temps pour nous de mettre en place la logistique nécessaire, puis nous en aurons terminé avec le programme de cette journée ensemble. Mesdames et messieurs, il s'agit donc d'un accord pour l'appui au Centre international de l'arganier, l'encouragement de la recherche scientifique et l'innovation sur l'arganier et l'arganeraie. Cet accord sera signé entre l'Agence nationale pour le développement des zones oasiennes et de l'arganier, qui sera représentée par sa directrice générale, que j'appellerai dans quelques instants. Il sera également, donc j'invite, si l'installation est prête, j'invite Madame la directrice générale, Madame Yacoubi Latefa, que je vous demande d'applaudir pendant qu'elle s'installe à la table. J'invite également l'Institut national de recherche agronomique, représenté par son directeur, M. Fawzi Bkawi, à nous rejoindre également pour la signature. J'invite également M. Abdelaziz El-Hraiki de l'Institut agronomique et vétérinaire Hassan II, donc qu'il est représenté par son directeur. J'invite aussi M. Mohamed Garroji, qui agit en vertu de ses pouvoirs pour l'École nationale forestière d'ingénieurs, l'ENFI. Mesdames et messieurs, pendant que le parapheur est installé sur la table pour cette signature, je vous informe que ce présent accord-cadre a pour objet de promouvoir un partenariat entre les parties pour l'appui et la contribution au développement du Centre international de l'arganier et l'encouragement et l'appui à la recherche scientifique innovante sur l'arganier et l'arganeraie et assurer la production et le transfert des connaissances, notamment à travers la formation et la recherche scientifique. Mesdames et messieurs, comme vous le voyez devant vous, la signature est en cours entre les différentes parties prenantes de cet accord important pour la préservation du patrimoine de l'arganier, en présence de son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre de l'Agriculture, son Excellence, Monsieur André Azoulay, et également en présence de Monsieur le gouverneur de la province d'Essaouira. Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, l'accord est à présent signé. Nous souhaitons plein succès à cette collaboration et nous vous remercions d'avoir été témoins avec nous de la signature de cet accord-cadre. Mesdames et messieurs, au nom du Royaume du Maroc et des Nations Unies co-organisateurs de cet événement, nous souhaitons vous remercier infiniment pour votre présence parmi nous aujourd'hui. Je vous souhaite une excellente fin de journée et je vous dis à très bientôt. Merci.